Next on Max TV, we take a look at Bradley Peterson, we take a look at Boxing After Dark, and we look ahead to the return of Kelly Pavlik. Coming up on the next round. And welcome to the next round, brought to you by Everlast. Gabriel Montoya, Steve Kim, talking boxing once again. We get a jam-packed show. We begin round number one from the Aguas Caliente Casino in Rancho Mirage, California. It was showtime, and for the WBO Junior Welterweight title, and it was the Desert Storm, swarming Lamont Peterson, winning a 12-round decision. Bradley goes to 25-0. Peterson suffers his first loss. He drops to 27-1. Your scores: 120-107, 118-110, 119-108. And in the opening bout of this broadcast, for the WBC and WBA Junior Bantamweight title, Vic Darchinyan knocks out Thomas Rojas in 2 rounds. Here's what I thought. I thought that Tim Bradley made a statement that not only is he the best junior welterweight in the world, he's one of the best fighters in the world, pound for pound, certainly top 10 to 15. Let's look at the last 18 to 24 months. He beat Junior Witter on the road, unified the title against a very difficult Kendall Holt, and he mastered a very talented, young, undefeated prospect in Lamont Peterson. Gabe, Tim Bradley has arrived.
Yeah, he's absolutely arrived. It's going to be a long time before I pick against him again this week. You know, this week I picked Lamont Peterson, thinking that he was going to be the outside fighter. He's the rangier guy. He likes to fight, you know, behind that 1-2. It turned out that Tim Bradley was the guy that dominated from the outside, and when they met on the inside, he dominated as well. I thought Peterson was in the fight, you know, no question, throughout the whole thing. He started to come on late, but Bradley's added so many wrinkles to his game from fight to fight. He just gets better and better every time. It's the mark of a great fighter.
Offense, defense, inside, outside, and coming through the side door. And the lateral movement, I never thought he could be this much of a cutie. Yeah. We know the way he looks. He's built like a very muscular fire hydrant. But the craft, and talking about rolling the shoulders, hiding his head, slipping punches, moving his head after combinations, getting in and out. This is a complete fighter. Outside of perhaps not being a very strong puncher, he has every other tool in that box.
He just seems, you know, incredibly prepared for each moment. You know, we go back to the when he fought Kendall Holt and he got knocked down in the first round, got up, was a little wobbly, and so he took a knee. And it turned out that they actually prepare for that scenario in the gym. And this fight, when he needed to get on his bicycle, he did it in a way much different than a lot of guys that do. You know, like Andre Durrell getting on his bicycle, he's just moving and there's no offense, he's just running. But Bradley actually did it really well, kind of stepped around, set some traps, and walked Peterson into some shots. It was awesome.
Yeah, his use of angles and pivots, it's almost reminiscent, to a certain degree, of a Jersey Joe Walcott. And you go back again, when a guy goes on a bicycle nowadays, basically they are going to the Tour de France. This guy actually made a 17-foot ring look like a 25-foot ring, which goes to show you that the size of the ring is really overrated to a certain degree. You shouldn't have to have a football field to use lateral movement effectively. But I'll say this, you look at the scores, 20-7, 18-10, 19-08. Lamont Peterson, I don't think this was indicative of just how tough this fight was. We saw Tim Bradley after the fight, and just his voice, he sounded exhausted because as good as he was and as dominant as he was at times, he had to work every minute of every round to be that good. And he even admitted it. He never had to work this hard for a victory. I think Lamont Peterson one day will be a world champion. His time is not now, but I think it's coming soon.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he's a quality fighter. You know, it was funny, Bradley he even mentioned it twice. He was like, man, those body shots. He kept, the post-fight press conference, he kept mentioning that, you know, we got ripped to the ribs by Peterson. It was killing him. But, yeah, Peterson, I think, is going to build from this fight. I think a lot of what came down to is not just how good Bradley is, but his experience. The run that he's had in the last, like you said, the last 24 months, he's gotten better with each fight. He's learned from each fight and moved on, and he's really a complete fighter or very close to it. Whereas Peterson, you know, is a very solid fighter, but doesn't have that experience.
Lamont Peterson really impressed me, though. Second round, he gets hurt. Third round, he gets sent to the floor. And at this point, you're thinking it's a blowout. Yeah. Instead, he turns round 3 into one of the better rounds of the year. And he didn't try to become a game loser. Unlike other fighters we're going to talk about later, his goal wasn't just to see the finish line. No. He was trying to win, and he pressed the whole way with the intention of trying to turn things around. Lamont Peterson, to me, reminds me of a situation like Winky Wright and Bernard Hopkins, two guys that were pound for years. That these are guys in their first world title fights lost, but they became better fighters for it. I could see one day Lamont Peterson winning a major championship belt and having a very, very productive run.
Yeah, there's this will be definitely a fight where you could see a rematch later on. They will definitely meet again, and it'll be probably even more competitive than the scores would indicate here.
Gabe, you take a look at Tim Bradley. I think the future is very, very bright.
Oh, yeah.
I know they're calling out Amir Khan. I'm not so sure Frank Warren pulls the trigger on that fight yet.
No.
But if you want to talk about a Super Six, I think the junior welterweight division is deep and stocked with young, fresh, marquee talent. Guys like Devin Alexander, Marcos Medina, Amir Khan. I guess if you want to put Paulie Malignaggi in there. And another guy like Victor Ortiz. There's a lot of fights out there between 140 and 147. Now, I think Tim Bradley, he's not a star yet, but he's certainly going to have an opportunity to really pad the resume.
Oh, yeah. I'd say throw Malignaggi in there first. Just get him out of there.
Oh, boy.
Because I never want to see him fight again other than against Tim Bradley or maybe a heavyweight.
Ooh.
You know, but
Wow.
the Maidana fight, that's going to be an awesome fight with Bradley. I kind of pick him to win all those fights. I think by the end of it, he is going to be a star.
Gabe, is it just me, or was Victor Chinin headed for a very long night? Now, I know Tomas Rojas, historically, we said this last week, every time he steps up, he gets stepped on. And the Achilles heel is that Tomas Rojas, for all his offensive tools and his range, doesn't have the best ability to soak up punches. But I thought in the time that I saw Victor Chinin, he looked like a guy, I don't want to say he shot, but I thought a guy that reverted back to lunging, not closing the distance with his feet, not doubling up on his jab. Now, he landed the lottery ticket, which is fine. But I look ahead and I look back. Nonito Donaire. I look at that style, the stature, boxing acumen, and toughness. I got to be honest with you. The guy that I saw Saturday night does not go real well against Nonito Donaire.
I think he gets stopped again, you know, maybe the 8th, 9th round this time. But he looked, you know, he came out and said, I wanted to show my power. It's like, that's kind of all you've ever been showing, those last few fights. And he looked limited. He looked a little slow. He looked like his timing was kind of off. And yeah, I agree with you. After the first round, I was like, uh-oh, this is going to be a long night for him. And, you know, Rojas made the ridiculous mistake of getting hit once by a left hand and saying, go ahead, hit me again, and then just knocked out. You know, but if he hadn't done that, I think he could have stunk the joint out and really frustrated Darchinian in the process and possibly pulled out a win.
But Victor Darchinian has what I call the eraser. He erases a lot of his own technical flaws. Yeah. And let's face it, that left hand wasn't exactly a textbook shot, but it landed right on the chin. Yeah. He gets an unbelievable amount of torque and momentum with that left hand. But here's the thing, in Nonito Donaire, he's not technically the most perfect fighter, but he's tall, he's upright, and he's very rangy and fast with that jab. Unless Victor Darchinian can close the distance and move his feet behind a double jab, which he really doesn't do.
Not at all.
And what hurt him the last time? Lunging in, getting caught with the check hook. I think that's going to be a problem. Victor Darchinian, I thought, was making some technical progress from the Agbeko fight to this one. This is looking more and more like 2006 and 7 than the guy that we saw in 2008.
Yeah, he's really regressed. Like you said, he kind of is coming in wide open. I think he's going to be there for the jab of Donaire all night long. You know, and he doesn't use his jab at all anymore. He was turning into kind of a boxer. Yeah. We were talking about him much the way we talk about Manny Pacquiao, that he's really improved, gone from a one-dimensional slugger to a guy that's got a little bit of tricks in his bag, but no longer.
All right, well, that's it for round number 1. We come back, we take a look at HBO's Boxing After Dark. And we are back on the next round, brought to you by Everlast. Steve, Kim, Gabriel Montoya talking boxing. Round number 2, we take a look at Boxing After Dark from Chicago, Illinois. The rematch, junior welterweights in action. Paulie Malignaggi, there is no controversy this time. All 3 scores, 116, 111. And Victor Ortiz gets back on the winning track, stopping Antonio Diaz in 7. And then from Switzerland, for the WBC heavyweight title, Vitaly Klitschko with the 12-round snoozer over Kevin Johnson. Malignaggi Diaz, in my opinion, was a lot like the first fight, except I thought Paulie Malignaggi was a little bit better. And Juan Diaz, well, I hate to say this, but if he was a car, he looks like a guy with 2 flat tires. No legs, no foot speed, and now the volume, which was his strength, no longer seems to be there. He either needs to get back to 35, give it a try there, but I get that distinct feeling we've already seen the best of the baby bull.
I would agree. I mean, it's looking like that time, and he's such a young guy, but you know, he's always been a guy with not a lot of power and very much a distance fighter. Like you said, relies on volume punching. And, you know, guys like that, they don't really have long careers. You know, if you don't have that great equalizer, you don't have great, you know, boxing skills. He's got decent boxing skills. You really can't extend. And you're just seeing him waiting and waiting. You know, at this point, you have to say that either Rocky Juarez or him have to go, because we can't have 2 guys from Houston that wait and wait and wait to the last 3 rounds to start fighting. I just can't watch it anymore.
Yeah, I hate to say it, Juan Diaz was about the most ineffective athlete this side of Tracy McGrady this past weekend. As for Paulie Malignaggi, I think he is what he is. He's a very slick boxer, not necessarily exciting. He has a very inflated view of what he's worth. I hate to say it. He's going to say that I deserve all the big names and need to come to my backyard. Here's the problem. He's not really a draw. He's not, for all his flash, he's not really that exciting.
No.
And I think that he has tools, but he kind of reminds me of that street baller who has good skills, but you know that he's not at the elite level. He's not hot sauce. He's not Skip to my Lou.
Yeah.
You know, he's not one of those guys. He's a guy that's pretty good at the street ball level. I think, to me, unfortunately, and Lou DiBella may not like to hear this, Paulie Malignaggi is a marquee name. He's been on HBO, been on Showtime. Unfortunately, going into the future, they don't have a lot of leverage. I think that they do play B-sides to the likes of Amir Khan and Tim Bradley.
Yeah, he's a marquee opponent, basically. You know, he's a guy that, in a way, you almost kind of are rooting to watch him lose. You know, he's not. He doesn't do himself any favors in there. I mean, his fighting style, he's very technically skilled. He's a fast guy. He can outbox you. But it's not exciting, and you know with 5 knockouts, there is no chance of him knocking the other guy out. He even looked shocked when he hurt Juan Diaz, and he couldn't do anything to finish him. And with 5 knockouts, he's probably not really worked on his finishing skills very much, and it showed. But then he adds all that showboating. He did the Roy Jones hands behind the back move, and Diaz looked at him like, what are you doing? And the crowd kind of turned against him. I mean, it said everything that he clearly won, but that the crowd booed him when they found out that he had.
The reality is he could beat a certain level of guy. He does have enough tools, enough
Absolutely.
skills. But throughout his career, when he stepped up to the highest echelon in facing true 140-pounders, guys like Tim Bradley, Amir Khan, Devin Alexander, Marcos Medina, you see the history there. Victor Ortiz, my question is this. Is he at that level? He did what was expected. Antonio Diaz, just looking at his body and the way he moved, he looked like an old guy who shouldn't be fighting anymore. I think there was the expected hesitancy and the reticence. I think he got himself into the fight a little bit, but I just wonder about Victor Ortiz going into the future. And I know everyone has this question. Can he come out of a dogfight? That we don't know.
I think I know. I don't think he can. You know,
interesting.
He looked very tentative. You know, one of the things that was weird about him, he looked very stiff. His no upper body movement. I mean, the arsenal is there in terms of his punches. And his footwork is actually pretty good. He can kind of glide around the ring, and he's really keeping that left hand glued to his chin, which he should. But, you know, after he's throwing a punch, he's there to be countered. He's not really tricky moving in. He's not shifty at all. He's very, almost like a European-style fighter, kind of comes right in and is there to be hit. And after watching, probably the world's best 140-pounder, one of the best fighters in the world, and then watching Ortiz hours later when I got home, I was like, there's no way Ortiz wins that fight.
It's a different echelon, there's no doubt. And they're both muscular guys, and Tim Bradley, like I said, he actually could be on the cover of Muscle and Fitness, but there's a certain fluidity to what he does, rolling of the shoulders, pivoting, moving the head. You take a look at Victor Ortiz, and I think you're right. There is an Ivan Drago-ish type of movement to him. The word stiff. He kind of does have the fluidity of a crowbar, and that's the problem. He does not absorb punches very well.
No.
It's going to be interesting to see just exactly who they put Victor Ortiz in there with. It's interesting. When you get knocked out by a guy, you always say, I want that guy again. I don't hear the name Marcos Medina from Victor Ortiz, his management, or Golden Boy. I get the sense they might try to make an Amir Khan fight, believing Amir Khan, for all his skills and boxing acumen, doesn't have the greatest chin. I think they rolled the dice there, but I certainly don't think they're looking at a guy like Tim Bradley right now.
I think that's a fight that the Khan camp would take. I think Freddie Roach would be all over that fight. That's a good fight, you know. I mean, I think whoever lands first, you know, is going to have the shot, because I'm not, so certain about Victor Ortiz's chin, and he's shown, you know, in the Maidana fight, and the fact that he isn't mentioning his name, that he's not crazy about adversity. You know, you look at him, and it's almost like they built a record. They didn't quite build a fighter.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a great marketing plan. The problem was you got to have the goods. You got to have the goods. As much as you can market a Milli Vanilli, when that tape shuts off and it rewinds and you can't sing, you're in a lot of trouble. That might be Victor Ortiz. Kevin Johnson. Listen, I like Kevin Johnson personally. I've gotten to know him. Here's the problem. That effort right there, I don't want to say the word disgraceful or cowardly, but I don't know what he was trying to accomplish out there. It was one of those fights you could have watched the first 2 rounds, rewound to the 12th, gotten the decision, and that was the whole fight.
Yeah.
Kevin Johnson's victory, in my opinion, was twofold. Number one, getting the payday. I'm sure he got paid well. And number two, saying, I went the distance. However, Gabe, in my opinion, in the opinion of many others, that is about as hollow a victory as you can ever ask for.
Yeah, it was a pathetic performance, I thought. You know, I mean, maybe he was trying to bore, Klitschko to sleep. I don't know, he was trying to mesmerize him by just moving. But yeah, I mean, I didn't see what he was trying to accomplish. He was kind of just staying outside. He was tentative, and it wasn't like he came in the first round and was active, and then he got caught and tasted Vitaly's power and was like, all right, I'm out of here. He was boring from the word go. I didn't understand it at all.
Yeah, him and Paulie Malignaggi are very similar in the sense that their interviews are incredibly fun and entertaining, and their fights are just absolute agony. The one thing I thought Kevin Johnson would do is jab from the outside, use a little bit of lateral movement, and try to set up sneaky right hands. He's not a real right-handed puncher, but just to lay on the ropes and act like a sparring partner. When you have a heavyweight championship on the line, and I got to say this, Vitaly Klitschko, I don't know what it was. He looked a little older, though. Looked like a guy that lost a half step on his fastball, didn't it?
Yeah, he did. He looked a little off, and I thought he'd be much sharper, coming off the Areola fight and that quick turnaround into this bout. But he did look a little older, and I don't know what that is. I mean, maybe he's just the kind of guy that if you don't bother him, he's not going to bother you, and so that's why he was also kind of passive in the fight. He did have a big guy in front of him, and in Johnson, I think he probably was maybe waiting for him to explode and start having some offense going on. And I don't know, the whole fight just lulled me to absolute sleep.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that Kevin Johnson showed more anger to Vladimir Klitschko immediately after fight than he did to Vitaly for 36 minutes before that. The thing about Kevin Johnson is that unlike a Chris Areola, we're talking about styles and being an entertaining fighter. Yeah. Chris Areola fights in a way, and he was courageous enough, at least against Klitschko, where a TV network executive would say, you know what, Areola makes good TV, he's a fun guy to watch. Kevin Johnson fought in a manner. He didn't just lose on this night in Switzerland. If you're HBO, Showtime, or even ESPN, you're presented by Joe DeGuardia with the Kevin Johnson fight. Gabe, if you're in charge of one of those networks, would you dare or even think about putting the kingpin on?
No, absolutely not. I mean, he didn't come to the dance. I don't understand guys that you train your whole life. It's a 7-day-a-week job unless you're Chris Areola, and you're working, you're getting beat up on, and putting all these miles on your body to get to this moment, and you show up, and then you fight like you don't even care. I just don't understand it. I wouldn't reward him with another TV date. Absolutely.
Yeah,
not.
I have to tell you, this show right here, this triple header, boy, this was a chore to watch. Me and you were both at Rancho Mirage at the Aguas Calientes, and we saw some exciting stuff on early knockout. Yeah. We saw a sterling performance by a very good young fighter, ascending to greatness perhaps. Then you get home. I watched it in the morning because I watched the U on Saturday night. I got to be honest. I know you watched it, I think, when you got back. Yeah. This was hard to watch from the word go.
Yeah, it was. You looked at the Showtime card, you looked at the HBO card. It was like boring flash and compelling substance. And I think HBO going forward really needs to look at what they're doing. I mean, why do you pay for Paulie Malignaggi versus Juan Diaz twice? Why do I have to see that twice?
Gabe, outside of Luda Bell and Paulie Malignaggi, who was really clamoring for this rematch?
No one. I think Diaz maybe felt that he could get another payday, and this is probably the best, safest fight because he can't get knocked out by Paulie Malignaggi, and then he can improve on a few things and win the fight, and that's probably why they took it, and they were dead wrong. But I don't want to see a third one. That's for sure.
No, they're even, but we've seen enough. They might be 1-1, but we don't need a tiebreaker.
No.
We come back. We take a look at the return of the ghost, Kelly Pavlik. And we're back on the next round, brought to you by Everlast. And we go to a top-ranked pay-per-view. We go to Youngstown, Ohio. It's the return of the ghost, Kelly Pavlik taking on Miguel Espino. And then from Mexico for the WBA bantamweight title, Nihomar Cermeño takes on Alejandro Valdez. And then Humberto Soto takes on Jesus Chavez. Kelly Pavlik is alive and well. There'd been an APB out there for him. He was on a lot of milk cartons. But he is alive and well, although he gave everyone the finger with the staph infection. I think, I got to tell you, I don't want to say that his fall was like Tiger Woods, but here's a guy that not too long ago was one of the really favorable stories in boxing. He represented a lot. He was a knockout puncher, a white guy from Youngstown, made exciting fights. His life has not been the same since Bernard Hopkins.
No, not at all. It's just been kind of a downward spiral, like you said. It's been a lost year for him, as you titled your article. But, here he is. He's back. And I think we should give him the benefit of the doubt. I mean, the guy's injured. He's never been, caught for steroids or, with 12 hostesses from that restaurant that Tiger Woods loves. He's always been an upfront guy, and I think he deserves the benefit of the doubt. In terms of the Williams fight, I think he still wants it. And this is just a good chance for him to get back. he didn't know he was even going to fight this fight, and they kind of called him last minute, and that says a lot about him that he decided to take it.
I think he had to take it. I'll tell you why. After December 5th went by the wayside, and I do believe there was a staph infection because there was a lot of evidence, and staph infections are very dangerous. That's one of the things now that professional sports are looking at. The Cleveland Browns had a big problem with that, where players were suing them over really not really regulating what was going on in the locker room. If you're HBO or Showtime or anyone else, if you're going to do a Kelly Pavlik fight going into 2010, no matter who it's against, I want to see some evidence that your guy can actually get to the dance. I think Top Rank basically said to Kelly Pavlik, no one's going to accept your fights going into next year until they show, or you show, that you can get into the ring and perform. I think he beats Miguel Espino fairly easy. He's a natural puncher. Miguel Espino's a tough guy, but he's a bit of a plotter. I think he's going to be eating right hands all night. I think all will be forgiven if he signs to fight a Paul Williams or a Lucien Bute. We're a very forgiving society. We like our athletes to be performers. If he wins this fight and signs immediately into any big major fight, guess what? Folks are going to forget it, and they're going to focus back on Kelly Pavlik, the prize fighter.
Absolutely, because he's, bottom line, like you said earlier, he's an exciting fighter. Yeah. He comes and he brings it. And even if in a losing effort, he's going to be there to try. He always believes in his two-fisted power, and he's going to come forward and make a good fight. I agree with you. I think he gets Espino out of there probably about 6 or 7. The guy's a very limited fighter. I think Pavlik's itching to make a statement here.
Yeah, also on this portion of the card from Youngstown State University will be Vanes Martirosyan. And from Mexico, Nihomar Cermeño, best known for beating Christian Maharis a couple of times. Humberto Soto, Jesus Chavez. I have to tell you, I don't see this fight going a lot of rounds. Jesus Chavez coming off a tough loss to David Diaz. I still think Humberto Soto is one of the very, very best, toughest fighters between 30 and 35. Jesus Chavez is a fighter I respect. However, like an Antonio Diaz, his best day was at least 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, turn out the lights, the party's over.
As Don Meredith once said.
Yeah, he's it's getting to be that time for Jesus Chavez, and for Soto, I think it's getting to be that time where he doesn't have fights like this anymore. Yeah, he needs to win this fight, which I think he will in about 5 or 6 rounds, and then move on to one of the other top 130 pounders. I'd love to see him fight Robert Guerrero next year or something like that. An all-action fight where we know who the other guy is, and it's competitive because he's putting a lot of miles on him. He's got a ton of fights under his belt, and I don't want to see him wasted on the vine.
Yeah, as they say, die on the vine. He's stagnated. I know he had that disappointing loss to Joan Guzman, but since that point, he's tried to stay busy. They almost had a fight with Edwin Valero, they thought. They talked about a Robert Guerrero fight earlier this year. They thought they had an Anthony Peterson fight perhaps lined up. None of it happened. I think 2010, and I'm not blaming him, but I think those who handle his career, Top Rank, and I think Fernando Beltran, it is incumbent upon them. Get this guy a major, marquee, significant fight. We come back. We wrap it up with news and notes. And we wrap it up here on the next round with news and notes, going to the fight preview Friday night in Montreal for the WBC light heavyweight title. Jean Pascal makes it 2 for 2 against Adrian Diaconou, winning a 12-round decision. In South Africa for the IBF welterweight title, we have a new champion, Jan Zavek, with a TKO 3 over Isaac Latshayo. And then heavyweights in action, Nagi Aguilera stops Oleg Maskayev in 1. Going back up top, Jean Pascal. Talk about a guy, and we mentioned this earlier, loses his first title opportunity to Carl Froch, and guess what? Made him maybe a better fighter. Diaconou, the Shark, is a tough, hard-nosed guy, and I haven't seen the fight yet, but I will be getting a DVD. From all indications, blew out a shoulder, fought with one arm basically, showed a lot of courage, and outboxed him maybe more conclusively than he did the first time. Jean Pascal, if he is healthy, I cannot wait for that April showdown with Chad Dawson. A fight I'm really looking forward to.
That's going to be an all-action fight. That's going to be a great fight. And Pascal, he's just getting better every time, like you said. And now he showed an entirely new dimension. I mean, he had
toughness.
Toughness, man. He had his shoulder out of place 3 times in the fight. In the corner like a pit crew, just popping it back in and sending him back out there. That's awesome. That's what you want to see out of a fighter. You don't want to hear a complaint, this and that, I got a cut, I want out of here. No, you want to see a guy that, I've got the title, I got to go beat that guy's ass, pop my thing back in, and let me go, get at him. That's beautiful.
I think Jean Pascal has tightened up technically a little bit. I thought when I first saw him on ESPN2 about 3-4 years ago, Gabe, first thing came to my mind, poor man's Roy Jones. Yeah. Did not have much of a jab, leaped in with a lot of hooks. use a lot of athleticism, but I think he's a little bit more contained. I think he has the foot speed, the hand speed, and the reflexes that, unlike a Glenn Johnson, who may have turned overnight, I think he's going to give Chad Dawson all he can handle in Montreal.
Yeah, I think from a style standpoint, he's going to be a big problem for Chad Dawson. Because, yeah, he's kind of settling into who he is, and so we're starting to see the perfect blend of his skill and his athleticism, and now the toughness, and he's fighting like a champion, whereas Chad Dawson is fighting like Jermaine Taylor when he got the title. He's really unsure of himself. He's hearing all the doubters, and you can see it in the ring that he's not quite sure of who he is yet. And John Pascal knows exactly who he is these days.
Gabe, you did the story on Oleg Muskayev coming into last Friday night. Let's hope that's the last story on Oleg Muskayev. Let's just face it, I didn't see the fight, but a TKO in one, I think, speaks for itself. The scary part is Oleg Muskayev was not that far off from a heavyweight title. What in the, as Barack Obama would say, that's an outrage.
Yeah, well, that's the WBC. Not only that, but they were going to make him fight a second title eliminator. He'd already won one, against somebody whose name I forget because he's nobody. And then he was going to fight Ray Austin for a second one to get a shot at Vitaly Klitschko. But, I saw the fight. It's on YouTube. You can find it. Or really the knockout. It's not much of a fight. It doesn't last very long. And he gets hit with a shot. He stiffens up. And it's really kind of brutal. He gets knocked down twice. And they said, he was even very dazed after the fight. Took a while to get his senses back. I mean, let's face it, the guy's 40. He's fighting like he's 40. He's taking punches like an old, 40-year-old with a lot of miles on him. It's time for the people around him to do the right thing and get him to retire.
So after he fought Ray Austin, was he going to fight Tony Tubbs and then Tony Tucker and then David Bay? Boy, that is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Moving on to the fight preview Friday night on Showbox from Minnesota. Fernando Guerrero and Sean Porter headlined, and in Japan for the WBC bantamweight title, Hozumi Hasegawa takes on Alvaro Perez. And then from Venezuela, WBC lightweight title, Edwin Valero defends against Hector Velasquez. Fernando Guerrero is one of the great draws. I don't know what he's doing out there in Minnesota, but in Maryland, he can sell 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 tickets. Yeah. Guy I want to see, though, guy we're very familiar with at the wild card, making his name as a Manny Pacquiao sparring partner, is Sean Porter. I'd like to see him with live bullets, so I want to see what this kid has.
Yeah, I'm excited. He's an action guy, and he can only have gotten better, fighting with Manny Pacquiao all that time. But yeah, he likes to bull rush in. He's a very strong guy. He's built like a fire plug, man. Yeah. He's really thick, strong fighter. He's got solid technical skills. But yeah, I can't wait to see him in an actual fight.
Hozumi Hasegawa may be the world's best bantamweight in a bantamweight division that has a lot of talent. From what I'm hearing, this will be his last title defense before he moves up to 122. And Edwin Valero, I got to tell you, even the people at Top Rank will tell you off the record, they're not saying he's Jamarcus Russell, not at that bust level, but he's been a disappointment. A lot of legal problems. He can't get into this country. He's acting like a prima donna. And I got to tell you, this far into his career, why is he fighting Hector Velasquez in a title defense in Venezuela?
Because he can't get into America to fight a good opponent. He's absolutely dying on the vine. He's 28 years old. This is when he should be priming and fighting the biggest names for the biggest purses of his career. And yet here he is. He's in Venezuela doing a title defense. I mean, hopefully he gets his legal problems solved, and then we can see the DeMarco fight next year. But I mean, you can't think that he's gotten better as a fighter fighting this level of opposition this long.
Yes. Moving ahead, wrapping it up here with some tidbits. Pacquiao Mayweather, folks. Dallas is not dead. Jerry Jones has upped his offer to $25 million. February 6th, Gabe just mentioned this. Edwin Valero takes on Antonio DeMarco on Showtime. Fight will be somewhere in Mexico, according to Gary Shaw. And some bad news here. Jermaine Taylor to continue on in the Super 6. Moving back up top. Pacquiao Mayweather, I'm sorry, it's a once-in-a-lifetime fight. They should make it a once-in-a-lifetime event. I don't know about you, Gabe. I've done Vegas. I've been there. I'm over it. I think this fight, if you really want the real fans to have a chance to actually get tickets and have a really special atmosphere, I'm for Dallas. I know it got shot down like J.R. Ewing, but J.R. Ewing arose and ended up living. You know what? Jerry Jones will not be denied, but I heard a $25 million deal. MGM Grand is going to have to make a hell of an offer to beat that.
Yeah, they are. And the big contrast here is that, if it's in Dallas, I'm going to have to travel really far to go see the fight. But, like you said, this is the Super Bowl, and we're not really going to see this kind of fight for a long time. Yeah, for a very long time. But if it's in that venue, the fans will be able to get tickets to it. If it's in Vegas, if you got $3,000 to spend, or some ticket brokers, maybe you'll be able to. But I think the fans are going to get robbed of the experience of being at this special event. The
reality is, any fan that wants to see this fight in Vegas must not want to see this fight live, because basically there may not really be a public sale, and that's become a big sham where the promoters and the brokers basically team up together to screw you guys. Don't feed into that monster, guys. If you go to Dallas, it might cost a little extra, but it's a fun city, and Jerry Jones is going to make it worth everyone's while.
Yeah.
And we talked about Edwin Valero. The DeMarco Valero fight, I think, is a competitive fight. I cannot wait to see it. I really like this acquisition by Showtime, taking the risk, going to Mexico. I know DeMarco may not have the chin. No one may have the chin to take the power of Valero. But you know what? The thing I like about DeMarco, he's actually fighting, staying active, living the life of a fighter. I think he's a very live dog here. I really do.
Yeah, this is a really competitive fight, especially because Valero's been sitting on the shelf. We haven't really seen him against many quality opponents. We've seen him, Pitalua might be the best opponent that he's had in years. And, that guy was kind of old and past it. But I think, DeMarco is kind of like Bradley. He's gotten better in each fight. He's starting to kind of blend, what they've worked on in the gym and really translated it into the ring. And he's become a very good boxer-puncher.
I think in this fight, he's going to have to transform himself and be a little bit more conservative and fight like a tall southpaw. I know he likes to bump and grind, which we love. But in this particular fight, discretion might be the better part of valor against the heavy knuckles of one Edwin Valero. And Jermaine Taylor, I got to tell you, the guy I got to give credit to is Lou DiBella. Lou DiBella told me and other people in private, I do not want Jermaine Taylor fighting anymore. He said, I promise if Jermaine Taylor makes the decision to continue, I will back out. He kept his word. Yeah. Jermaine Taylor can fight. Lou DiBella didn't necessarily have to promote him. I think we have to give kudos to Lou DiBella. He's doing the right thing. Now, I don't think Jermaine Taylor's doing the right thing, but you know what? We're going to go to the Andre Ward fight. This has all the makings of another sad story.
It really does. It's a very classy move by Lou, and it's a sad moment, I'm sure, for him, But it would have been hypocritical of him to feel that way, to think that, hey, it's your time. This is what a promoter should do, and the people around a fighter should do, is save him from himself. That's their job. And to say, look, it's time for you to hang him up, because a fighter is never going to quit. You can say a lot of things about Jermaine Taylor, but he's never been a quitter. But, to see the guy that's been knocked out twice this year in brutal fashion want to continue, the guy's got his money. It's time to hang him up.
Yeah, Gabe, you talked about how Oleg Muskayev now reacts to punches where he basically freezes. There's almost like a disconnect between his senses and his motor skills and everything else. We're saying the same thing with Jermaine Taylor.
Absolutely. Yeah, he gets hit and it's done. Most guys, like you saw with Victor Ortiz this weekend, right before he knocked down Diaz, he got caught with a big shot, but his arm came up and he countered. You're not seeing that from Jermaine Taylor anymore. And, the guy wasn't exactly a defensive specialist to begin with. He gets hit. And I don't really want to see it, because I think this Ward fight is particularly dangerous because Ward is not a big puncher. This is going to go the distance. I think Ward's going to beat him, and I think he's going to hit him a lot. And when you've had a major knockout like that, that just spells tragedy.
Yes. So there you have it. Sometime in April, it'll be Ward and Taylor. Well, that's it for this week's edition of TNR. On behalf of Gabriel Montoya and the rest of Max Boxing, till the next round. Goodbye, everybody.